have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hummon. Welcome back, Ann Northrup.
You didn't have to get sick just because I came back.
Oh, it's something in the air.
I don't know. It's maybe allergies, whatever.
We don't know.
You are a little under the weather. But I am happy to be back, or happy to have been away, or whatever. Both.
But in the news, we don't have to tell you, but the Trump assault on human decency, immigrants, and our courts is intensifying.
So nothing has changed since I've been away.
Well, it's just getting worse.
But the Democrat-led House did condemn Trump's racism and voted to end his ban on transgender service in the military.
See what happens with that.
Not much.
Well, we told you about those gay teachers at the Catholic schools in Indianapolis and their various faiths. Well, there's a couple of twists in the story.
Our ambassador to China is a former Iowa governor, and he is very homophobic, and that is going to cost Iowa taxpayers millions of dollars.
It is. And the governor of Puerto Rico and his circle, this was a big story this week, are exposed as raging homophobes, among other things.
We will look at the passing of a virulent anti-LGBT bigot in Congress, the passing of an essential ally on the Supreme Court, and a trans pioneer.
The big tech companies are funding the campaigns of officials who oppose LGBT rights. You may have seen them at your local Pride Parade.
And there's now a new campaign to fight those corporations giving that money to the anti-gay politicians. We'll tell you about that. We will also tell you about the suspects arrested in anti-gay murders in Detroit and in DeKalb, Georgia.
I've been covering the trial of Abel Cedeno, the bullied gay teen in the Bronx who fought back in the classroom, he was convicted this week of manslaughter and assault for fighting back against that attack.
A legendary gay man will be on the money in Britain.
And Billy Porter scores a first at the Emmy nominations.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
All right, well, Trump.
Race baiting.
Oh, God. Well, this is all a very specific strategy on his part. The Democrats were looking like they were splitting between the big group with Pelosi and the 4 congresswomen seen as out to the left. And Trump wanted to pull a fast one on Pelosi. So he starts all this race baiting of the 4, forcing Pelosi and the other Democrats to move to their side. And now he's got the whole group to condemn as socialists and unpatriotic America haters throughout the campaign. He's very happy.
Communists, according to Lindsey Graham.
Among other things.
I haven't heard that one in a long time.
So the question is this strategy going to work?
Well, here's what we've read in terms of polling is that it has somewhat intensified his support among Republican racists, which has become essentially a racist party at this point. I mean,
and he's polling at 45%, which is about as high as ever.
But this has hurt him among independents. And his campaign staff is worried. And we're taping on Wednesday, get him to modify his language in the morning and drop certain phrases that phrases that he was using.
But he's celebrating his strategy and crowing over the fact that
What can we do? Either you get it or you don't.
But I'm interested that he's such a Machiavellian type that he would pull this.
It's such coarse bigotry, and of course, what depresses us the most is that it works with so many people.
Yes, who celebrate the fact that he's going after these whippersnapper, uppity women of color.
Yes,
and Nancy Pelosi to boot.
Well,
so it's very depressing to
Yes.
come back and see that be such a popular stance.
Well, of course, there were a bunch of horrible things that were happening this week. Some people say this was Trump trying to distract from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal that he's being implicated in. Nice footage of the two of them together.
And Robert Mueller next week.
Right.
We can't wait for next week's distraction.
And although, it's also distracting from his crackdown on asylum seekers.
Absolutely.
Why would he want to do that?
Pence goes to the border and just lies about what's in front of our faces. They're so shameless and so relentless.
So this asylum seeking thing, I mean, of course, the new policy that was announced this week is that if you are from a country and you go through another country, you can't ask for asylum at the border.
They just make this stuff up as they go along.
They do. But then we're reading this story that for gay people, the Border Patrol doesn't want to send the gays back because Mexico will
not take them.
Won't take them.
Well, that's the story. It comes from the Washington Examiner in D.C., which is a very conservative paper and not always actually accurate. So, but the story is that LGBT asylum seekers who come into the U.S. will not be sent back to Mexico as other asylum seekers are. And they're also afraid, according to this story, that others will claim to be LGBT.
No, well, they were trying to keep this quiet.
Yes.
Because now they're worried everybody's going to say I'm gay.
Yeah, just like trying to get out of selective service and not go to Vietnam in the late 60s.
Yeah, it didn't work after a while.
No,
you couldn't just say you were gay. You had to cut off 2 of your toes.
Look, you can't.
Literally.
You can't, we'll get to the international stories, but in a lot of countries around the world, you can't even be gay and assert you're gay and subject to violence.
I was very proud to see Rise and Resist, a New York-based activist group, out there at 42nd Street and 5th Avenue, blocking traffic at rush hour. I believe it was, to protest what's going on with ICE. And show the next picture. It's everybody we know from the Queer Liberation March and from Gays Against Guns and Rise and Resist. These folks, and look they're all smiling. Many of them were in jail until 4 o'clock in the morning before they could get out. But they are totally dedicated to this, and they just came through, as you did, this Queer Liberation March, which was such a triumph.
Yes, well, that puts you in a good mood.
Oh, well.
But yeah, this was in reaction to the announcement by Trump and the government that they were going to conduct these national roundups of undocumented people to throw them out of the country.
Right.
So there was a lot of reaction to that all over the country, and that just happened to be one action in New York. The threat, of course, was observed in the breach to some extent. They did not do it as widely as possible. You never know with Trump which threats to believe and which not, because he often just routinely makes threats and then doesn't follow through.
Well, they followed through on dropping charges against the police officer who killed Eric Garner 5 years ago on a Staten Island street. Eric Garner, this is Officer Pantaleo. So it was under, Obama's Justice Department said they wanted to do this. There were people in the Justice Department now who said they wanted to prosecute this officer, but they were overruled by Barr. I mean, I think they waited too long, obviously.
Well, these cases often take a long time, but the explanation for why they weren't going to take this on as a federal case was certainly specious. We can't prove that the officer meant to kill the guy.
The coroner, well, he executed, and I use the word advisedly, an illegal chokehold, and the coroner said that it was the illegal chokehold that killed him.
Not to mention that he was, he's selling loose cigarettes on the sidewalk.
None of which have been recovered at this point.
Oh, so even that may not be true.
Right.
But he wasn't resisting. There was no violence. They just grabbed him because he was trying to talk his way out of the arrest. And they grabbed him, they chokeholded him. He said 11 times, "I can't breathe," and they wouldn't let him go.
And now it's up to the New York Police Department, which has a procedure against this officer who has been kept on desk duty all these years. And it's
5 years.
And the mayor keeps dodging it and saying, "Well, that's up to it's everybody's entitled to due process." But you're the mayor. You do the hiring and firing. Don't put this off on someone else.
Well, the officer may yet be fired. That often happens in these cases too, even if they're exonerated by the legal system.
And then there's what's happening to our courts. We got some statistics about the Trump judge count at this point. He has now been able to get confirmed with McConnell in the Senate 123 federal judges, 41 to the Federal Court of Appeals at this point. Obama got 19 circuit court judges confirmed at the same point in his administration. Trump has gotten 41. So now Trump controls 22% of the judges on the Court of Appeals and 14% of the judiciary overall. And they are 78% male and 87% white. Jimmy Carter is really one of the ones who really accelerated diversity on the bench. I mean, yes, Lyndon Johnson appointed Thurgood Marshall, and there were other federal judges who were African American and Latino, et cetera. But Carter did a lot for that. He's the one who first appointed Ruth Bader Ginsburg to the federal bench, not to the Supreme Court. So it's awful. But then we have these stories, right, about Pence. He is actually trying to stop a former Indiana Solicitor General, Thomas Fisher, from getting a seat on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals because he doesn't want his social conservative governorship to come under scrutiny at his hearing.
He knows that if this guy is nominated, because he defended all of Pence's anti-LGBTQ and anti-abortion,
religious freedom,
all that stuff.
Why wouldn't he be proud of it? And also,
if the guy goes up for nomination and goes to a Senate hearing, he's going to get grilled about all this, and all this stuff about Pence's policies is going to be back in the headlines.
Also, Pence's plan to block Syrian refugees, if you remember that crisis back in the day. So
I do. It seems a long time ago.
Trump is making a lot of progress in the Ninth Circuit, which used to be the most liberal circuit, and now we get a decision from them refusing to block the Title X gag rule, which is really something that is going to hurt all women's health, of course, but also people with AIDS and other things.
There's just, there's no end to this, and it's, I would have to say, worse than we ever imagined.
As I always say, that's the reason I went to the hospital with chest pains the day after the election, because no. I mean, yes. I felt it all. I knew what would happen. This is what happens, especially since we got rid of the filibuster on federal judges, and then there's just nothing to stop anything anymore.
So we can celebrate the fact that the House passed the condemnation of Trump for his racist comments, but where's that going to go? Even if it went to the Senate, they're not going to pass it.
Well, it's mainly aimed at suburban white women and trying to peel them away from Trump, as we did in the midterm elections.
Yes, and that is certainly a sign of hope, and one can hope that they're all sitting there waiting to be activated next year. Yeah. Now, the other thing is that the House passed a defense authorization bill and included in it amendments that repeal the military trans ban. At the direction, I think, or the insistence of the more progressive members of the House, like the Squad, as they're evidently calling themselves.
It got 10 Republican votes.
Well, this whole split started because the Squad didn't want to vote for another funding bill that they thought was too mild and not progressive enough. And that split them from Pelosi, and that's why they were coming apart. Right. So they insisted on these amendments to the defense bill, but certainly the Senate will pass a version without these amendments, and then when it goes to conference, who will prevail, and will that stay in it? Highly unlikely. Well, and even if it does, will Trump veto it because of those measures in it? He's perfectly capable of doing that.
And weaken our defense?
Yes. Because
as somebody has pointed out,
he's made these threats before.
All this crap that he dishes out at these women, they hate America. He spent the whole 2016 campaign saying how awful America was.
Yes.
Awful
it
was.
Yes.
You know, this is
Well, you don't expect consistency or truth from him, do you?
I don't expect anything but lies.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals upheld an injunction against the enforcement of Trump's regulations, broadening the employer's exemption from requirement under the ACA to provide contraception coverage. Very important. They said that Trump went beyond the Hobby Lobby decision, and he was trying to apply it to publicly traded corporations and let the coverage, and he also wanted to let the coverage end without notice.
Yeah, and I don't think he's going to give up on that. He'll keep trying that.
Yeah, but
and that was the whole thing about the Hobby Lobby decision. It was based on a privately owned company whose owners had an established religious point of view. But as that got approved, we looked at it and said, it'll never stop here. This is just opening the door a crack, and they'll be charging through with much more attempts to limit payment for reproductive.
We're going to be talking about the UN more under international news, but the Senate is on the verge of approving Andrew Bremberg, a policy director of the Republican National Committee in 2016 that wrote the anti-LGBT platform, as U.S. ambassador to the office of the UN in Geneva.
All right. Well, let's give him a little semi-good news, and that is a new campaign against corporations that have... The campaign is called Zero for Zeros. Yep. And it is about corporations that have 100% ratings from the Human Rights Campaign in their corporate equality index, meaning they have good policies for their LGBTQ employees, they give benefits, they're progressive in those areas. But as we have learned, certainly recently, they turn around and they give massive donations, millions of dollars, to right-wing Republican politicians.
Almost all their campaign donations are based on keep my taxes low and regulations low.
Yes.
That's it. They don't want to hear anything else.
Well, they're a corporation.
Well,
that's their goal.
Yes, but you know, if something is bad enough, like racist, sometimes a corporation will be so nervous about supporting, like, although they're not nervous about supporting Steve King, the racist from Iowa.
That's the point. They may purport to have good values on us and on others, but when the rubber hits the road, their bottom line is their highest priority, which I would expect from a corporation. Well, and therefore they're looking at things like their tax load and like regulations.
But we are always trying to, or we should be trying to move them away from that and saying this will be bad for your bottom line if we expose the fact that you're doing this.
Exactly.
We've gone through this before. Remember Target, the company Target, making all those horrible donations?
Well, that's what this campaign is about. So some Lane Hudson and other people in Washington who are experienced at this kind of political analysis have put together a campaign called Zero for Zeros. And the idea is to pressure corporations by saying, we are your consumers and we will impact your bottom line if you keep donating so much money to keep in power these Republicans who are so heinous and are doing all these things that we've just been complaining about for the last 20 minutes.
Right.
So here, for example, is one of their images. Representative Steve King of Iowa.
Condemned by the House for his racism.
But recipient of large funding from T-Mobile. So if you go to zeroforzeros.org, that's zeroforzeros.org, you can find their campaign, find lots of images like that tie these politicians to the corporations that are funding them.
Wasn't Steve King so bad that it was even the Republicans were still in control of the House and they had to condemn him?
Yes.
That's right.
Exactly.
Right.
But T-Mobile, wanting help from a powerful Republican member of Congress, not so powerful anymore, but is funding him with lots of money, as are other corporations.
Right.
So congratulations to those who are putting together this campaign.
And I'm glad to see, that the whole census issue is not being dropped. Yes, we won this, Trump has pulled back on the citizenship question, but now there are groups, including the ACLU, who are trying to bring those who committed fraud, who lied in their testimony, to justice on that case.
That would be nice.
Well, he's getting rid of Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, right?
Well, we've heard that several times. I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay.
When it suits him, he will get rid of Wilbur Ross. Political news. We have an out gay new candidate for Congress in the Bronx, New York, Richie Torres, a member of the New York City Council.
He's only 31.
And he is Latinx.
Grew up in the projects.
And would be the first person of color LGBTQ member of Congress. Mm-hmm. He, however, is opposing Ruben Diaz Sr. on the left there, who
76 years old.
And very, very popular among his evangelical constituents.
Exactly. He has a base, but a congressional district is a lot larger than the council district that he has now, or the state senate district he had before. So, whether he can win just on that basis, I would think that could only happen if there was a big split in the vote.
He has won. How big was his assembly district? Yes.
Well,
or Senate, whatever it was, state.
He didn't get over 50% of the vote in a very mixed race when there were a lot of candidates in. No, because there were a lot of candidates.
Well, we're rooting for Richie Torres.
All right, and in Michigan, the Victory Fund has endorsed John Hoadley for Congress. This is the 6th district there, not very far from South Bend, Indiana, actually. It's down there in Michigan. Yeah. And it is held by Fred Upton, who is an anti-LGBT congressman Republican.
All right. Iowa, back to Steve King's area. Terry Branstad was the governor of Iowa for a long time. And while he was governor of Iowa, he was discriminating against the out gay commissioner of workers' comp.
And this position was supposed to be something that you get for a set term, and the governor can't come in and fool around with it. So he went in, I think, and cut his salary or something like that to get rid of him.
What a guy. Well, now Terry Branstad is the ambassador to China for the United States, payoff by Trump for help in Iowa. But meanwhile, the ex-commissioner of workers' comp has been suing Branstad and the state for discrimination, and he has now won that lawsuit and has been awarded by the court $1.5 million.
And they're likely to charge court costs to Branstad.
Yes.
Branstad had to come back all the way from China to testify in this case.
Yes, he didn't want to do that.
For the day.
Yeah, but he did.
In Virginia, there's an anti-LGBT member of Congress named Denver Riggleman. But he, this week, performed a wedding for a gay couple. This guy opposed the Equality Act, opposed transgender service. The gay couple volunteered in his campaign. They're log cabinites, and they say, well, we're primarily conservative. And that's
yes, and he said he performed the ceremony because everybody deserves equal treatment. Really? In Reading, Pennsylvania, they were scheduled to raise a pride flag at City Hall for LGBTQ Pride Day or whatever. But the mayor, who had agreed to this, suddenly canceled it. He said raising the flag would be a political event. And he didn't think it was...
Everything to do is a political event.
Yes.
The hell are they talking about?
Yeah, and so he canceled the flag raising.
Let's go to the Catholic schools.
Okay.
We've been telling you these stories out of Indianapolis. So you have one Jesuit high school that had a gay teacher, and the bishop said, you got to get rid of him, or I'm going to take away your Catholic designation. And they said, all right, you're going to take it away because we're going to stand by this guy. The other school was a diocesan school, and they didn't want they had more sway over the diocesan school.
Yes.
And
Funding
they fired
and
the gay
stuff.
teacher. It turns out they're married to each other.
Really?
Yes. And they're both named Payne Elliott, all right, Joshua.
That must have been the giveaway.
Joshua was fired. Well, they didn't have their names in the stories.
Yeah.
Joshua was fired. He's suing the archdiocese. That's another wrinkle for being fired. And the husband, Leighton, is still at the Jesuit high school. And Joshua, by the way, has also filed with the EEOC over this. Oh, and of course, you know, the school, the people in the school wanted to keep these guys, you know, and they are able to keep one of them.
Well, good luck on that.
So
lawsuit.
the other Catholic school thing, Notre Dame High School in San Bernardino, they fired a gay principal back in April, and the school president has now resigned in protest. Other staff has quit over this, and financial support for the school is dwindling, and the principal is suing over this.
Well, speaking of married same-sex couples, congratulations to the Native American Sioux couple, Felipa de Leon and Monique Muffy Monceau, from left to right. They have convinced the Ogallala Sioux tribe in Rapid City, South Dakota, to legalize same-sex marriage. What is often overlooked is that when same-sex marriage was legalized in this country a few years ago, that did not apply to Native American territory, reservations, because they are self-governing to some extent, and certainly in this area. So one by one, various tribes have taken on the question, and this is a new victory.
Yeah.
These women wanted to marry some years ago, and when it was legalized for the U.S., and we're told that the tribe had not legalized it for their territory.
But they did it legally.
They went off and got married elsewhere.
At Mount Rushmore.
And then worked on pursuing the tribe legalizing it, and now they have. So thank you for that work.
Right.
In Puerto Rico, let's go to Puerto Rico.
Let's talk about governors.
Yeah. The governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rosales, has always been very pro-gay publicly, or not always, but recently anyway.
But considered, Trump liked him over the mayor, right? Down there.
Probably, but he'd approved some LGBT stuff more recently. But now comes to light hundreds of pages of text messages among him and members of his administration in casual talk about a number of subjects. And one of the things they did is disparage everyone in sight.
Using Richard Nixon's favorite word that we can't say on this show.
Begins with C.
Ends with R.
Yes. And has 4,
He
6,
applied it to a
10 letters.
He applied it to a gay journalist. He applied it to a rival politician. Then
applied it to Ricky Martin.
Another guy in his group, Christian Sobrino, said Ricky Martin is such a chauvinist that he F's men because women don't measure up. I mean, what
they called the former Speaker of the City Council of New York, Melissa Mark Viverito.
They threatened violence against San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulin Cruz, who is running for governor next year. Now, some of his people have resigned, including the Secretary of State. But he said, Rossello, as of this taping, said he won't. There have been massive demonstrations down there.
Ricky Martin is flying in for one.
They kept a cruise ship from landing in San Juan because
Royal
of
Caribbean is stopping, having its cruise ships stop in San Juan.
But Rossello is not saying if he's going to run for re-election, but he says he won't resign because there's so much work to do.
All right, so we have a little side bet. I bet he resigns.
Trump? That would be nice. I'm actually thinking he will at some point.
Okay, then we don't have to bet on it.
To escape something, but anyway.
Well, it just seems traditional that people say they won't resign, and 2 days later they do.
I left out a religious story. Well, let me do the other governor story, and that's that Jared Polis, the openly gay governor of Colorado, there's a campaign to recall him. These people, they had their thing approved that they can go collect signatures. They need 631,000 signatures to put it on the ballot, and it'd be the first time that ever happened in Colorado. They're upset about the oil and gas industry, gun control, things like that. But Jared, we're with you.
Yeah.
All right. Crime news.
Sure.
Well, let's see.
You have to fill us in on the Abel Cedeno case.
So I've been covering this, we talked about this bullied gay kid. This happened in September 2017, where this bullied gay kid brings a knife to school for protection, and then
he's been bullied for years.
They're bullying him in the class in the beginning of the school year.
And the school won't do anything about it.
He gets up, he comes back, he gets up, he comes back. He usually just goes home and just doesn't go to school, which is why he was left back. So this day, not recommending this, kids, he brings a knife. His friend says, have a knife on you, as many kids in the school do. Have a knife on you, and then they will leave you alone. So in this case, he's there, and after he's getting tortured. People are throwing things at his head. The DA treated this as, oh, the kids were just having fun. That's the way they said it. So he says, who's doing this to me? Y'all, and he said pussy, y'all pussy. And the DA said, these are fighting words. And this prompts two kids to get up from the back to charge him. And at first he doesn't pull out the knife, but then he sees the guy push the teacher out of the way to get at him. So he holds up the knife in his right hand. He's not right-handed. He wants to stop him, and the guy charges him and starts beating his face. There's tape of this. And he's not experienced with a knife, so he starts going like this. This is him on the stand. I just went like this, and he's got a knife in his hand, right through the heart of one guy, dead, and the other guy gets slashed. So the judge, now they rejected so much evidence in this trial of the fact that he knew these kids to be gang members, and he was worried about them having knives or weapons.
Right.
So the judge found him guilty.
And the extent of the harassment.
And they wouldn't let that in either. So the judge, he was able to talk about it himself on the stand, but it was all the evidence of all the reports of how he was mistreated over the years were not allowed in. So he was found guilty of manslaughter, guilty of assault, and weapons possession. He faces 5 to 50 years on these charges. Now they're going to try for youthful offender status. He was 18 years old when it happened. Look,
yeah, that can go either way.
That can go either way. Right.
So
then it would be much shorter. So it's a tragedy for everybody. Now everybody's suing the school system for not dealing with it. Well,
not having metal detectors.
He's on the stand, and he keeps saying, they kept calling me a bitch and a faggot all the time in class, and this is in previous years. And they said, what did the teacher do about it? Oh, come on, everybody, quiet down. Not deal with it. And one teacher said, "Why don't I get you two together, the bully and you?" And or tell oh my God. So the schools are on the hook for a lot of this. Now, what's a teacher supposed to do in the middle of
They've closed that school, by the way, because they finally dealt with the idea that it is impossible.
So it's the whole thing is
terrible
heartbreaking.
Story.
Heartbreaking.
But
kids need to know what their options are. Oh, he tried for a transfer. He was turned down. Anyway, all right. Other crime stories.
In Arizona, a camp rejected a 9-year-old trans boy, a foster child, for a 4-day stay at the camp on the grounds that they would have to do too much training of the camp staff.
Yeah, well, that's why we have a Harvey Milk School, because the schools don't want to deal with the issue. In Detroit, a man was charged with shooting 2 men because they were gay. Malcolm Drake, 26, is in critical condition, and Brian Anderson, 31, died. Demetrius Nelson, 26, used Grindr to target them. And he's charged with first-degree murder, felony murder, and assault. And then DeKalb, Georgia, 2 suspects in the shooting death of a gay man, Ronald Peters. Joshua Ellis and Shalia Moore. There are murder warrants out for them both. Ellis is in custody. They robbed him with homophobic slurs, and the other one's on the run.
And then a sad case of domestic violence. WNBA player for the LA Sparks, Rakuna Williams, has been suspended for 10 games. She is said to have attacked an ex in the ex's Florida home. Eventually pulled out a gun and threatened a couple of guys who were defending the ex.
She was booked on.
The players' union is appealing the suspension, but that's fairly routine for Major League Sports players' unions appealing any kind of suspension like that. It doesn't sound good.
And then there's the Presbyterian pastor in Elizabeth, New Jersey, William Weaver. He's accused of sexually abusing numerous men over the years. This is going back decades. He would do an elaborate ceremony that involved purging evil spirits from their bodies by performing oral sex on them. And he told the victims he learned it from Native American tribes. And then he would put his tongue in their mouths to see if the evil spirits were hiding there. But he has not been indicted. He's retired, and he has not been disciplined by the church. They say they're investigating.
Let's talk about some people we both admire and didn't admire who died this last week.
Well,
I want to get the taste of that out of my mouth.
This is very sad. Bibi Scarpinato. We have a picture here of the whole Gay Activist Alliance crew, including in the center there our associate producer Bill Ballman. But Bibi is on the left of that picture in the back in the dress. This is someone who was very involved in the early Gay Activist Alliance, worked with Sylvia Rivera and Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, the Queens Liberation Front, was on the original board of the National Gay Task Force, and active in planning the first Christopher Street Liberation Day. So, and was there at the march.
That was like her last appearance just a week ago or 2 weeks ago at the march. By the way, if you're wondering what comes next for Reclaim Pride and the Queer Liberation March, we are wondering that ourselves. So we are having a community meeting on Wednesday, the 24th of July, this coming Wednesday, at 7 p.m. at the People's Forum, where we conduct our weekly meetings at 302, is it 302 or 320? Now I'm 320 West 37th Street. I may have given the wrong information to our associate.
No, it's not 302, yeah. And it's, forget.
Oh, West 37th Street, the People's Forum between 8th and 9th Avenues.
It will be.
It is 320, you're right, because it's halfway down the block.
It will be in our weekly email blast, which you can sign up for by going to our website, www.gayusatv.org, and also give you the information on the, I guess, the memorial service or funeral for Bibi Scarpinato.
Thank you, Bill, for correcting that address. Apologies for giving you the wrong one. 320 West 37th. So Wednesday, 7 p.m., Reclaim Pride. Where do we go from here? Right. You can be part of that conversation and the work. And BB's service is on Saturday, July 20th up in East Harlem. Okay. So we will talk about that. Now, less admirable. Less admirable, despicable. One of the most despicable human beings who will talk about that. That's true. William Dannemeyer. Orange County, California congressman. Before it was Democratic. Dead at 89. Yeah, he read excerpts from describing gay sex acts into the congressional record to get us somehow, and then he called for quarantining PWAs, return of anti-sodomy laws. He said that PWAs emit airborne spores that can give HIV to those around them. He later recanted that. Representative Henry Waxman, who was one of our heroes, was the chair of the Health Subcommittee, said he was a mean and hateful man, and he had no sense of humor. And later in life, he married Dr. Lorraine Day, a Holocaust denier. Yeah, he was relentless. He was one of those ones who just kept pounding and pounding and pounding. Now, for Supreme Court analysis, I go to you. John Paul Stevens, dead at 99. Oh, now there's a real hero. Appointed to the bench by Gerald Ford, yes, who said that if he was remembered for nothing else than the appointment of John Paul Stevens, he would be very proud and happy. And he replaced William O. Douglas, the greatest liberal, who was the longest-serving justice, and he was the second longest-serving justice, John Paul Stevens. And according to something I heard today, didn't like to be reminded of that. Oh. But but he turned into a great liberal and was certainly with us on all the cases. He was appointed to the court, I think, in 79. 75.
Yeah.
So he was there for all the cases like Romer v. Colorado and...
he voted to get rid of the sodomy laws in '86, which we lost 5-4, and then we won
Bowers
in 6.
v. Hardwick.
We won the Lawrence decision.
Yep.
He wrote the dissent in Bowers v. Hardwick to go after them.
A really wonderful
He moved
guy.
left on the death penalty.
Yep.
But he said that the 2000 Bush v. Gore decision can only lead credence to the most cynical appraisal of the work of judges throughout the land, and that it really hurt the judiciary to step in there and essentially make a political decision. He was not always a liberal, but he insisted on strict separation of church and state. And I learned by reading his obituary that he served in World War II at Pearl Harbor working on breaking Japanese codes, for which he was awarded the Bronze Star.
More on that later.
Yes.
And finally, Rose Green of Los Angeles.
She developed the inaugural California AIDS ride in 1994, and that's what she's most famous for. But she was also she was an activist in the 60s, essentially before Stonewall. She's died at the age of 72. She was on the board of the LGBT Center for many years, and she is survived by her wife, Helena Ruffin.
All right, are we ready to move on to international news?
We are.
Before we do, I will pass along a rumor that for those of you in New York, and particularly the Chelsea region, watch out. Replacing Olive Garden at 22nd Street and 6th Avenue, reputedly Chick-fil-A.
Oh, no.
Well, I think they gained a toehold. They first came in with one place by NYU, and the world didn't blow up. And now I noticed there was a Chick-fil-A on 6th Avenue that we marched past that people stopped and yelled at.
Oh, at least they didn't stop and eat.
They
grab a sandwich.
They yelled.
Why wasn't Chick-fil-A out there passing out sandwiches?
Well, if they'd been smart. But now I think they're going to expand their footprint in New York, and we're going to have to figure out what to do about that.
International news. Yeah. In Brazil, Glenn Greenwald, the Outgate journalist who was famous for breaking the Edward Snowden leaks and criticized for criticizing Russiagate. He lives in Brazil with his husband,
David Miranda,
who was a state senator down there. And he's been doing stories about the corruption in the prosecution of the former president Lula that paved the way for the anti-gay fascist Bolsonaro, and now they're after him. He's got bodyguards all over the place. He expects that they're going to try to put him in jail for this, and he says, they're making death threats. They're going after his husband, calling him a girl. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, it's just scary down there. He says, put me in prison, but it's all going to come out because, he puts the information where everybody can get it.
That's right. Well, he is kind of fearless.
Yeah. Sweden.
For better or worse. Sweden rejected a gay Iranian teen who's there asking for asylum. They took his trans sister a couple of years ago.
Yep.
But this is one of these cases where they refuse to believe that he's gay.
Well, he had an early interview where he said he had a bad interpreter and it all went badly.
Yeah.
And now they're saying, well, there was nothing wrong with that procedure, so we don't want to hear anything new. And he's afraid of dying if he has to go back.
To Iran, where they do, in fact, kill people.
He does have a 23-year-old Italian partner, and he's being backed up.
They've been together for 18 months.
Yeah. Anyway, so... but he was, was supposed to be out in 3 weeks.
Israel has a little dust up going because the new education minister says that not only does he support conversion therapy, he has performed it successfully.
It works.
He's an Orthodox rabbi. He's the head of an ultranationalist United Right Party. And this is the problem with coalition governments, because then these tiny minority extremists who give other people a majority to put together a government have control.
Israel has never had a majority government, ever. So they've always had to cobble together these groups. This guy also said that he's guilty of anti-Arab racism, and he called Jews marrying non-Jews a second Holocaust. So Bibi Netanyahu got on him and said, this isn't us, we don't believe this.
This is unacceptable.
You've got to convert.
It's not the government's position.
He says, I'm not for conversion therapy, he posted on Facebook. Come on.
Well, here's what
I'm talking about the rabbi.
Yeah, exactly. So here's what I noticed was in Netanyahu's statement. He referred to the pride community.
Say it, Bibi. Gay. Just say it.
At least say LGBTQ.
Well,
but the pride community. Maybe we should call ourselves the pride community. What are we, lions?
Better news from Britain.
Okay.
Where Alan Turing is going to be on the 50-pound note in a couple of years, in 2021. He was chosen from 1,000 nominations because they want to broaden the diversity of it. This is the guy who essentially invented computers and broke the Nazi code and the war and saved hundreds of thousands of lives. But he was convicted of homosexuality in 1952, given hormone treatments as opposed to prison, and he died in 1954, some say of suicide. He was pardoned, though, in 2013.
The Bank of England made the choice. This is not a government choice. It's the Bank of England choice. The 50-pound note is the highest value note and the least used, but it's certainly getting a lot of publicity.
I don't see those. Anyway, the quote on the bill is something he said in an interview, which is, "This is only a foretaste of what is to come and only the shadows of what is going to be." That sounds kind of ominous, actually, and that's what's happened.
Is that what you want on your money?
That's what's happened with computers. But anyway, he was brilliant, and he's being appreciated. Of course, people didn't hear about it at the time because the people who did the Nazi code breaking, they weren't allowed to talk about it.
No, of course not. Now, I was also interested in
for many, many years afterwards.
Yeah, I get it. And until we have the TV series about
Bletchley Park, of the women.
Bletchley Circle.
Bletchley Circle,
So then the Theresa May little tidbit comes along, which I thought was interesting. You must have talked about Northern Ireland.
Yes.
I watched the show, but I didn't retain that.
Yeah.
How the British Parliament is forcing Northern Ireland to legalize same-sex marriage, maybe. But the little scandal in this is that Theresa May, on her way out of power, has been saying, and I will be with the LGBTQ
pride community.
Yes, exactly. For the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I may be leaving power, but I'll be with you for the rest of my life.
Trying to tell us something?
And then didn't vote on the forcing Northern Ireland to legalize same-sex marriage.
Well, she didn't. The European Court of Human Rights has fined the Russians for not letting 3 LGBT groups register over the last 10 years. They're charging them $41,000.
Yeah.
But this has to do with the Olympics and all that. Oh, because and Russia argued in court, this will destroy the moral values of society and undermine Russian sovereignty by decreasing our population.
Well, that's been their position for many years. The United Nations has extended the term, a second 3-year term, for their expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, violence and discrimination. And they got a bigger vote this time around. I'm not sure what this guy is actually doing, but it's considered a positive. But the U.S. didn't vote. And why? Because Trump took us off the Human Rights Council at the UN early in his term, so we no longer have a vote on things like
India
this.
abstained.
Yeah.
India's legislature is also revising a trans rights bill. We got some bad thing out of it that, made you have to go through a screening panel to get certified that you're trans, but the final draft is not ready yet.
But there were African countries and others that stepped up and voted for this expert this time around, and that kind of thing is progress.
How about FIFA's new policy? Speaking of soccer, referees can shut down games if these are soccer games or what they call football, if anti-gay chants are extant in the stadium, and Mexico is apparently the worst offender.
They are. They've been talked about for years.
Puto, they say all the time.
I don't think that's going to make the Mexican fans stop saying all that.
Well, I wish we could get what's going on in Honduras to stop, but 3 trans women were killed there just this month, and this is the kind of stuff that people are fleeing from Central America and coming through Mexico to try to get here.
But that doesn't impress Trump, because he just doesn't think, and at the same time, he's cutting off any kind of funding for Honduras, Guatemala, Ecuador, what's the other one? El Salvador, right. Because he doesn't want to fund them anymore, but it's that kind of funding that can make a better society that would have people less attacked, but he's taken it away from each end.
Right.
A number of stories from Canada. The Anglican Church of Canada has been considering sanctioning same-sex marriage.
Allowing it, yeah.
Yes, sanctioning in the sense of allowing.
No, I know.
It can be used either way,
right.
but allowing it, approving it within the church. So they've been going through this three-step process, and the lay people approved same-sex marriage. The clergy approved same-sex marriage, but the bishops have just fallen one vote short of the 2/3 approval needed.
Each house needs 2/3, and this must mean that they passed it the last time, a couple of years ago,
yeah,
and that they didn't this time. But the churches say, look, we're going to keep doing this. The ones that want to do it are going to keep doing it.
Okay. And there was a rather violent clash at the Pride March or Pride Parade in Hamilton, Ontario, because there's a vicious right-wing group that came out to attack the parade, and that led to...
In Canada?
They've had terrorist attacks in Canada, and there is a strong right-wing presence in Canada that we assume doesn't exist, but they're there and they attacked the Pride Parade in Hamilton. And finally, good news. Canada has been dealing with its own lavender menace, purge of LGBTQ people from the government years ago. And they had already apologized and agreed that 718 people who they've identified had been the victims of these purges, had lost their jobs, had been followed, interrogated, abused, fired, harassed. So now they're going to pay reparations anywhere from $5,000 to $175,000, depending on the level of abuse.
Right.
Some people are afraid to claim the money because they are still so affected by what happened to them decades ago that they are afraid to step forward and acknowledge themselves as having been victims, and they're having to work to get people to come forward and get the money.
And who's afraid of the United States? Sort of moving into AIDS news from international news, the global gag rule that bans abortion referrals, it's really severely impacting HIV/AIDS services and prevention abroad, and it leads to much higher abortion rates. But in Mozambique, the agency that deals with all kinds of health, they can't stop mentioning abortion to people. They've lost 60% of their funding. So all you're doing is just making health outcomes worse for everybody, especially people with AIDS.
That's the whole point.
And it leads to more abortion, if that's what you care about.
No, they don't care. They don't care about anything but themselves. So from there on to entertainment news.
Well, what's bar dykes?
Oh, I saw this adorable little play.
I'm going out of turn.
That's all right. We can handle this. You know, Tassos, The Other Side of Silence, which is like the longest-running gay production company in New York.
Doric Wilson. And of course, this is Kathleen Warnock.
Yes, and Kathleen is still kicking and doing great, and Doric died some years ago. Street Theater was one of their famous productions, and I saw a revival of that during Pride Month that they did at the Stonewall Inn. Well, they decided their next revival should be something about lesbians. And there's this play called Bar Dykes, written by a woman named Meryl Mushroom.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. That is her name.
Yes. So here is the cast of Bar Dykes.
It was written in the 80s, but it's about lesbian bar life, I believe, in the 50s.
Yes. And it's playing at the Flea Theater downtown through August 3rd. It's adorable.
Oh, you saw it?
I saw it. I saw it at a preview.
Is it fair to say it's about butch femme culture?
Yes, a lot about that. There's some of that clashing there. but it's very funny and it raises all those issues. And it's really only a little over an hour. And afterwards, at the performance I was at, they had a panel discussion, including with Meryl Mushroom on the phone from West Virginia, where she's living. I think it's West Virginia. Maybe it was Tennessee. Tennessee, that's it.
And it's at
I'm only getting back into the swing slowly.
It's at the Flea Theater through August 3rd.
Adorable.
I'll have to add it to our list of recommendations.
It's nothing monumental, but it is absolutely charming. And if you want to be entertained by looking at lesbians at a bar in the 50s, it's terrific.
Remember that movie, My Beautiful Laundrette,
Yes.
British indie movie that brought Daniel Day-Lewis in a very uncharacteristic role to the fore, a gay role. At that time, it's being turned into a play with music by the Pet Shop Boys, and it's opening in Leicester, United Kingdom, September 20th. We'll see if it makes it over here.
Coming to a theater near you soon is a remake of The Lion King with various big voices like Beyonce starring, singing, big deal. So they had an opening in London, and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were there. And so there was all this, oh my God, Meghan Markle meets Beyonce, la la.
And Billy Eichner.
Billy Eichner is one of the voices in it, doing Timon, which is a historically gay role. Nathan Lane did it in the last version. So Billy Eichner has been writing about hanging with Beyonce, meeting Meghan Markle, and it's all extremely hilarious.
We knew you when you were just wandering the streets of Chelsea, making people crazy.
Doing Billy on the street. So that was just cute.
All right.
The Emmy nominations came out. Pose is the big story. They got a lot of nominations.
And the fact that Billy Porter is the first African-American gay man to be nominated as lead actor in a drama for Pose.
Oh.
But there is so much LGBT content.
Well, and Pose itself was nominated, but a lot, the women, the supporting characters, the trans women, were not nominated, and that's a shame. But that's a huge nomination for Billy Porter.
But Killing Eve was nominated.
Yes.
When They See Us, a limited series. Well, there is a trans role in When They See Us about the Central Park Five.
Laverne Cox was nominated, Cherry Jones, Hannah Gadsby, Jane
Hugh Grant
Lynch,
for playing a gay role, Ben Whishaw, who is gay, for playing a gay role.
Queer Eye, RuPaul, Wanda Sykes. Nothing for Gentleman Jack, I'm sorry to say.
Oh God, it's not up this year.
I don't know. I assume if these
Jane
others
Lynch was nominated for
Yeah.
Marvelous Mrs.
As I
Maisel,
said.
as you said. I'm just looking around. I can't say the name of that show, probably get us in trouble. Ellen was nominated for Game of Games, Wanda Sykes, and Hannah Gadsby.
Yeah. And the Guggenheim Museum next week is opening part 2 of its big
Right.
Stonewall 50 Mapplethorpe exhibit. They've just finished the first 6 months one of Mapplethorpe material. This time, the next 6 months is going to be 6 artists influenced by Mapplethorpe, and I assume compared to his oeuvre. And Catherine Opie, lots of.
I like the
5
Mapplethorpe
others.
show a lot.
Yeah.
That's there.
Well,
And you're going to get more.
starting July 24th and through January 5th, there will be lots more Mapplethorpe at the Guggenheim.
So, are we going to survive all this or no?
Well,
I'm not optimistic at this point.
Well, I'm certainly not optimistic about what's going to happen to the country in the next year and a half before we have a real chance to get rid of him. I don't think we're going to impeach him. I don't think for a long time I thought he'd resign.
Yep.
That we'd be able to drive him out of office, but I no longer think
Come on,
that.
New York State is giving you a chance to look at his taxes. Take a look, would you?
And Kellyanne Conway,
Oh.
What is your ethnicity? Oh my God. It is gobsmacking every single day.
Every single day, and we need to do more. And
It
I
was
know
a
you're all
pleasure
depressed.
to be out of the country.
But it's nice to be with you. Thank you
Oh,
for watching.
Yes, and we will see you here next week, same time, same bat channel.
Now, I know we